Today is March 13th, 2024. This is episode 62 of Sean Vowells. And today, I'm joined by Joe Meade. Today, we'll go over the Big Ten all-conference teams and then preview the tournament. That has already started, Joe, but we're not going to, the games that have already happened or that are happening in a moment here, probably not going to matter a whole lot in the long run. So, Joe, we have started off these conference previews with our thoughts on the location of the tournament. Big Ten's going to Minneapolis this year. Opening thoughts on the Big Ten tournament being in the land of 10,000 lakes.
I'm not a huge fan personally. I think, Minnesota and Golden Gopher fans will tell you, and other schools in the area especially, that's hockey state. That's a hockey state. Look at Minnesota high school hockey. That's what we know the state for. I think in a conference where you have venues such as, Baker's Life, United Center, Chicago, Indiana, you think of those cities and think basketball immediately, right, Sean?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
for Minnesota to get it is kind of ridiculous.
yeah.
And,
Yeah,
you
go ahead.
know,
Yeah, finish it up.
I really don't think Minnesota fans are going to flock in numbers. I could be proven wrong, and maybe you could say it's because of the caliber of the team, but in reality, so that alone should make the strongest case as to why the Big Ten should not return to Minneapolis. But Sean, I really digress from there. I think it's a place of common thought for most fans in this conference. So maybe we could be united after all.
I think, Joe, the one thing that I'm taking away from this is, the famous Big Ten commercial with the schools going across the country. Minnesota is far away from the Midwest schools. I know maybe, we've got LA schools in New Jersey and Maryland in here now, but like Minnesota is pretty far away from Indiana, Iowa, Nebraska, Ohio State. So I don't think they'll get it again. Maybe they're just throwing it to them once here, but we'll see. I'm not a huge fan of it either. I think it should be in Chicago or Indianapolis every year, and maybe you can throw in Detroit here and there. But those cities are the heart of the Big Ten, and Minneapolis is not very close to any of them. Obviously, the University of Minnesota is right across the river, so they should have a good turnout, but they've kind of fallen flat on their face here the last couple of weeks after a pretty promising season for Ben Johnson. We do not have any future venues announced, Joe, that I can find, so just going to have to, they've experimented with Washington, D.C. and, Madison Square Garden, but other than that, it's United Center or whatever the field house in Indianapolis happens to be called at the time. And I think we both agree that we suggest that they go back to that.
All of it, they just want to show that it's there. So that's kind of what the commissioner and the power structure seems to be doing. But if they really want to do that and it makes them happy, I guess good on them. But because it does not make the fans happy.
We could see, Joe, really anywhere in the whole country now that USC and UCLA and Washington, like, if they keep this rotating model, who knows? Maybe one year they'll go to the crypto.com center in Los Angeles or, Seattle or
Vegas even. They had the
Vegas.
Pac-12 football game there.
They
Championship game there,
They
yeah.
have a ton of other tournaments there in the past, and that's Chicago and Indianapolis. So, Joe, the second part of these shows, we're going to go to the awards for the Big Ten. All the conferences do them differently. It's kind of annoying, honestly. The media and the coaches have quite different teams here first, but we're going to go into what was unanimous, and that was the Player of the Year, Zach Edey. No questions asked, really.
No questions asked and no comments that really need to be made. If anyone watched probably at least more than one Purdue game, and I say one Purdue game because maybe you caught them on one of the few nights where they were not on and phenomenal, no one would really disagree with you. So no questions asked. Zach Edey, second year in a row where it wasn't even close.
So, Joe, we've got now the Defensive Player of the Year, which I thought was a little bit odd Ace Baldwin gets it from Penn State. Definitely one of the best defensive guards in the conference, but in a conference with a lot of good rim protectors, I was a little bit surprised they went with the fifth-year senior from Penn State.
Yeah, I don't know, Sean. I truthfully, you could have gone with Shannon. Really, no one on Michigan. I know that, but no, it's the least controversial in terms of besides the ED pick. I don't think that we'll get into. It's going to arouse a lot more debate.
So we've got co-freshman of the year, Joe, and this year was sort of the year of the co-awards in the Big Ten. We've got Owen Freeman from Iowa and Mackenzie Mbako from Indiana taking the awards. Freeman obviously was a front runner for most of the year, and then Mbako from Indiana really came on late. Not much separating these two. Their stats are pretty similar. Indiana's the sixth best team. Iowa's the seventh in the bracket. So, clearly votes were split, and that's why the award was as well.
Sean, I think the only debate is whether you felt Mbako is more valuable to the Hoosiers than Freeman was to Iowa. And I'll be truthful, Sean. I think Mbako is more valuable. As down the stretch, he became, better and more acclimated to college basketball in general, better court awareness, better offensive decisions. I think that's what led to Indiana's late when all the Woodson rumors came in and Mbako started playing better. I don't know what that means for next year, but in terms of this year, I think Mackenzie Mbako being good is a lot more important for Indiana in 2023-24 than Owen Freeman being good for Iowa was this year. So if I had to pick one, it'd be Mbako, but both have promising futures in this conference should they decide to stay. But, from now on, Sean, we're going to have to always have this discussion because these guys aren't guaranteed to stay in college basketball, let alone their own school. So, yeah.
Yeah, Mbako, obviously a five-star, was committed to Duke until Kyle Filipowski decided to return. He reopened his recruitment, ended up going to Indiana, and was thought by many to be a one and done. But Joe, he kind of went from unplayable because of his defensive issues to the best player or second best player on the court recently. His ability, he's made some tough shots, and that has been very important to the Hoosiers as they've ended the regular season on a 4-game win streak. But Freeman's pretty good too. I mean, he's a pretty important piece of that rotation in Iowa, and kind of the Ben Krikke is a good offensive player, but he's kind of the only presence in that front court for Fran McCaffrey. So I'm not super disappointed that split, but I do think I'm happy for Mbaka that he got it because he's definitely turned it up late. We've got sixth man of the year going to Mason Gillis, and Brandon Brantley from Purdue also getting the assistant coach of the year award. Not sure how that's a thing, but Joe, the one thing that I want to get to here is we've got co-coaches of the year. Fred Hoiberg and Matt Painter split the award after pretty good seasons from both programs.
Sean, I'm not going to take away anything from Matt Painter this year. Purdue was even more dominant in conference the whole year than they were last year. I think even Matt Painter would agree that it should go to Fred Hoiberg. I know a lot of people projected Nebraska to surprise. No one really was fully confident in saying it. And he turned them from a team last year that really from February, Sean, of 2023 to now, Fred Hoiberg has been on fire. And the final award for February 2023 to currently for the whole country in terms of coaches of the what that be? Coaches of the 13 months, not coaches of the year. That was really poorly stated, but it would go to Fred Hoiberg. I can't think of a coach who's had more of a turnaround in terms of a program that's, not only was bad, but probably their ceiling looked to be, 500, and that's what everyone thought Nebraska was. And it's what they ended up being. People thought it was cute. They were a 500 program, but now they're a 20-win team, Sean, and you're the bracketologist, but I think they're pretty safely in at this stage. So to even get on the cusp of it would have been an accomplishment, but to get in too, I think we're here. It's house money.
Yeah, I agree with that first part, Joe. I think getting third in the Big Ten when you're projected 12, then getting first with the National Player of the Year returning. Coach of the Year awards are usually for the the coach who overachieves the most, and it's impossible to overachieve when you're picked to win the league. And um, clearly some people thought Hoiberg should get it. I thought he should too. Collins was probably in the running until Northwestern. I don't necessarily think they flamed out, but they definitely didn't play great coming down the stretch. Obviously a ton of injuries over there, but Nebraska has the second most wins in the Big Ten, Joe, since that February of last year, like you said, and that's a lot to do with Fred Hoiberg. He's got a fun team, and this year he's kind of saying, like, we can kind of let them go now because they're talented enough not to have to be real slow and limit the game and limit possessions and stuff like that. And they are a lock, for sure. They'll hear their name called, and at this point, if you want to be out of the 8-9 game, you probably want to lose your first game in the Big Ten tournament. And, that obviously you want to make sure you definitely get in, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. That is pretty much all, or the first team, there was one. The media and the coaches could not agree on one of the first teamers. The coaches got Damask in there, and the media got, hold on, it's loading up here for a second. The media had Jameer Young instead, and Shannon, Bowie, Edie, and Braden Smith were unanimous selections. So thoughts on those 6 being given at least one first team award?
I agree with all of them. I know I've often been a Tyson Walker apologist on here. I truly do think these awards should be, how valuable each player is to their team and to the conference itself. If Tyson Walker wasn't on Michigan State, I know they underperformed severely this year. I couldn't tell you what that record would be. It wouldn't be 18-13. I promise you that.
Yeah, I think he's there. I think you can apply the same logic to Tyson Walker, although his numbers have kind of really fallen off recently because he's playing hurt. He has a groin injury, and he's still getting buckets, but it's taking a couple more shots. We got second team, a lot of players here, Joe. I think we could split hairs over these. Pretty much everybody in a rotation got on the honorable mentions, which I think is all you have to be is mentioned once in one of the ballots that one person picks to be an honorable mention, and there's over 50 that submit them. So I think we're gonna end the awards there. Obviously you like to see the players rewarded for their play, but at the end of the day, if you're on the first team, there's no advantage once you get on the court with somebody who's on the second team. So, Joe, that's the awards. We're going to go to bracketology now for the Big Ten. And, previously I'll just kind of say where every team is, and then you could ask me some questions, move or not. So we got Purdue being the number 1 seed in the Midwest region. We have got Illinois as the 4th seed in the South region. Wisconsin as the first 7 seed in the East. Northwestern is an 8 in the South. Nebraska is a 9 in the East. And Michigan State as last 4 in. Now, I did do this on Monday. Very few of these teams have actually played. But, with Oklahoma losing today and Mississippi State being dragged down by their numbers the past couple of days, maybe Michigan State gets out of the first 4. But definitely they're going to be sweating if they don't take care of Minnesota tomorrow. But, Joe, any thoughts on any of these Big Ten teams and where they'll end up in the bracket?
So I know besides Michigan State, Nebraska's the only other high seed in your bracketology. I know Northwestern's also an 8. I don't think a loss to any of them would dip them even close to the bubble. Is that correct for Nebraska, Northwestern?
Yeah, they're okay. There's a lot of mid in that range, and we're a sample size now. I don't think one more loss to a team on a neutral site is going to do much there.
Yeah, Sean, this is probably the most pressing question for Spartan fans who listen. If they lose, are going to have to help them out or not help them out?
It's going to be hard as bad as they've played and as ugly as they are to watch, it is going to be hard for them to be left out, even with a loss to Minnesota. It's just their predictives are off the charts. They're a top 20 team in the net, which the committee loves to. Well, they created it, so they need to kind of live and die by it. And, and it's Michigan State, too. It's the Michigan, even if they do lose to Minnesota. And you might have to sweat a little bit. Obviously, it'd be nice for the Spartans if Dayton and FAU take care of business in their conference tournaments. Maybe you don't go to Dayton, but, it's going to be too hard to leave them out with their predictives so strong. And, they have a couple quality wins, too. They beat Baylor, they beat Illinois, they beat Indiana State, who they're right next to now in the at-large category because the Sycamores lost in the in Arch Madness. But, I don't want to say you're definitely going to be in, but it's going to be really, really hard for the Spartans to be in the finals. Like I said, Dayton's right above you. If Dayton doesn't win the A10, they're going to take a loss to a team that's probably not in Q1 and maybe not even in Q2 on a neutral. So, I'd look for Dayton to lose and you to get to, and you should be there on the 6th line. Anything else, Joe?
Got it, Sean. I think that covers it for now. No, Sean. I think we covered it all. I really think there'll be more pressing questions after tomorrow, especially after Friday, in terms of teams moving out, moving in, moving up, moving in, and hopefully for Michigan State's sake and the conference's sake, Michigan State hopefully doesn't get close to that bubble. Hopefully for them, they just get in the tournament, no questions asked for the conference's sake, because Minnesota doesn't have a real shot at getting in unless they win the whole thing. So, no, Sean, let's get into the tournament itself.
Yeah, the people are really liking to put Iowa close to that, and I just don't see it. I mean, maybe if they're playing Ohio State, first of all, and they're very likely, it's a very high chance that they do not win that game, which would obviously eliminate them, but, maybe if they beat Ohio State and Illinois, maybe they get considered, but I don't see it right now. It's just been too big of an inconsistent season from the Cyclones, and the committee might just put you in anyway because they want the Big Ten is the last game this year. The American has been the last game in the past, so the committee's going to have their bracket before the championship game of the Big Ten. It's going to quickly get to the tournament bracket. I'll throw it up onto the screen for those who are listening on YouTube. Rutgers has already advanced. Maryland has already advanced. They beat Rutgers. They will play Wisconsin tomorrow. Other than that, we've got, 3 of the 4 matchups finalized, and then Penn State and Michigan either are starting soon have already started to face Indiana. But anything that you're looking out for specifically from Thursday's games?
I think the obvious one is Minnesota, Michigan.
The Zoom crashed. I think we're back. It says we're
back. Yeah,
I
think your bandwidth was low for the last
Yeah,
awesome.
It says we're back, and it didn't. The recording didn't stop, so I think we're still going. So Indiana's got to go on a crazy run. Who's disconnecting again, and it keeps reconnecting and disconnecting. Not sure why that's the issue. Clinton his pick. He thinks Illinois is going to cut down the nets in Minneapolis. Joe, who you got?
John, I tried to be fancy last year. I picked Michigan State, and it's always the fad thing to do to pick the non-obvious pick. But I'm just gonna roll with Purdue, Sean. This is a team that's just systematic. They've been the whole year, besides a few lapses. So, I guess one bold prediction I'll make is, I'll just go out and say, I think Ohio State makes a decent run in this. Maybe they even put themselves on the fringe of the NCAA tournament. I think they take care of Iowa. I think at very worst, they fight Illinois to the death in an inspired effort. But it wouldn't shock me to see them on Saturday. It wouldn't even shock me to see them on Sunday. They did it last year as as one of the worst teams, a Wednesday team. They went all the way to Saturday. So no stranger to that. I think the Buckeyes are a team no one wants to see, not only for the way they're playing, but also since they're not a quality win nor loss. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'd happen to agree. I think Purdue, it's the Purdue Invitational until it's not. and they're on the top of the bracket. That part of the bracket is pretty. I can see that being pretty chalky. But on the bottom, Joe, we've got the 10 seed and the 6 seed playing really well. So there's a way that the bottom of the bracket could be kind of pure chaos. And we'll just have to see. It's already underway. Maryland has already beaten Rutgers, and Penn State and Michigan are underway as well. So thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast, where we went over the Big Ten Conference Tournament. So Big Ten, it's already underway from Minneapolis, Minnesota. We'll see you next time.